Thanks so much for coming. It's really a privilege to be able to share our natural motion story with you here today in this incredible venue as well. As the slide says, my name is Ernest. I'm a senior innovator. If people haven't heard about this Nike Explore Team thing, it's actually what used to be called the Nike Innovation Kitchen. It's just now been kind of renamed the Nike Explore Team, so that's what that means. And actually, I think the last time I was in London was a little while ago. It was in 2009 to introduce the original lunar line. And if you guys are familiar with that shoe, it was one of our earliest examples of applying natural motion principles to a support running shoe. So natural motion is something that I've really been focused on for almost my entire career at Nike. And so whenever I get an opportunity to share our natural motion gospel, I can't resist. So it's been great to be out here and talk about it. I think a lot of you will already know that we're a running company. You know, we're pretty well known for our football products and our basketball products, but we were founded by a runner and his coach. The runner being Phil Knight and the coach being this guy, Bill Barman. And he was full of a lot of wisdom. He left us with some amazing nuggets, including if you have a body, you're an athlete. That was something that Bill Barman said, and it's a core part of what our company stands for now. Something that he said that isn't as well known is this quote. And I love this because it's incredibly relevant to what we do in the natural motion space. It's really at the core of why we pursue natural motion. And he said, everything you need is already inside. And it might sound a little bit obvious and trite, but back when he first said this, when he was coaching in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the prevailing view was the exact opposite. Coaches back then believed that there was one right way to run. And their job as a coach was to get every one of their athletes to run in that one right way. So Barman was just completely on the fringe. He just had this totally opposite belief that, no, actually, we each have our own unique movement and performance potential, and my job as a coach is to bring that out, to amplify that, not to try to change it. And he delivered on that in a few different ways. So one great example is that this is the training journal that he created for each of his athletes, and this one is specifically for Steve Prefontaine, the legendary middle distance runner from Oregon. Because again, he knew that we're all different. We're not going to benefit from the same exact training program, so he created programs that were tailored to each of us, just like we're doing today now with our new services. Another thing he did was he created products specifically for each of his athletes. So this is a last, that's the form that uppers are all made around, and he made custom lasts for each one of his athletes. Again, this one is for free, but every one of his athletes would have gotten a custom last so that he could make custom shoes and also custom apparel to ultimately allow them to express their own individual performance potential. So it came to life. You know, he talked about it. He also delivered on it every day. I think the cool thing is that if you talk to athletes, a lot of them really get this right away as well. And a perfect example of this is this guy, Michael Johnson. He's really well known because he won 4 Olympic gold medals across the 200 and 400 meters, as well as 8 World Championship gold medals. But he's also very well known for having a weird way of running. As you can kind of see here, I think, you know, he has this very arched back and he has a relatively low knee kick, whereas the classic way that you're supposed to sprint was lean forward and with a high knee kick so that you can get a long stride. But Michael recognized that that kind of way you're supposed to run wasn't right for him, for his body. And that's because he's a relatively tall guy, but he has short legs for his height. So if he were to try to do a high knee kick, he just would be wasting time because he could never match the stride length of his competitors because his legs are so short. So instead, he adopted this lower kick that allowed him to get each foot on the ground faster and give him a faster cadence and ultimately make him faster and make him ejected. So it's just such a great example of this idea coming to life, that each of us is unique and we're at our best when we can tap into that unique potential. And he's really talked about this eloquently as well because many, many coaches tried to force him to change. But fortunately for him, he was stubborn enough and confident enough to stick with what he knew came natural to him. So I think that's a great example of this idea coming to life in an athlete. And you don't have to look at history to see examples of this either. If you look at the best women in sprinting today, in the 100 and 200 meter events, in Allison Felix and Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, they couldn't be more different. Allison Felix, she's really tall, her legs are like up to here, it's amazing, she can take these incredibly long strides like an antelope. Whereas Shelly Ann, if you meet her in person, she's like seriously up to here. She's really short. And she uses her legs like pistons in an engine, like really fast cadence. And it's amazing because they're both at the pinnacle of their sports, but they couldn't be more different. And it's their differences that make them great, and they've tapped into those differences. So that's really what we mean when we talk about everything you need being inside, and our job is to try to unlock that. I think the cool thing is if you take a step back from the world of sport, this becomes even more obvious why this is such an important idea. So 4 million years ago is generally agreed upon, that's when our earliest ancestors started to walk upright on 2 legs. And you know, it's a really long time ago, so I'll try to put it in a little bit of context. 4 million years ago today, if we overlay the oldest known shoe, it was discovered on this guy they call Ötzi, the Iceman, was discovered in the Tyrolean Mountains. And that's the first shoe that anybody's ever found. It's believed to be about 5,300 years old. So the whole history of shoe innovation is about 5,300 years versus the history of our natural motions evolution over 4 million years. When you look at it in that way, I think it just becomes really clear that to try to beat nature would just be a fool's errand, you know? There's no way we can make up for that head start. So instead of trying to fight nature, we're embracing it. We're embracing this kind of 4 million years of accumulated wisdom that's inside all of us that dictates the way that we move today. And scientists have an expression for this accumulated wisdom. They call it our innate motor programming. But in kind of more normal people's terms, I think a lot of us would refer to it as probably something more like our natural instinct. That's what's inside of us that tells us how we're supposed to move. So this is what we're trying to unlock with natural motion. That's our ultimate goal, is to allow us to run and move the way we're designed to move, but on the artificial surfaces that we're surrounded by today. That's kind of the key distinction. So the foundation of free is about mimicking your natural motion, the way you move naturally on a natural surface, but on the artificial surfaces that we're all forced to run on today. So hopefully that makes sense. The thing is, before we could mimic natural motion, we have to understand it. And back when we started this project in the late 90s, nobody had bothered to try to understand this because everyone was really caught up in shoes. And so nobody took the time to figure out, oh, what do we actually move like when we don't have shoes on, when we're just in our natural state? So our Nike Sport research team undertook a really big effort to understand what is natural motion. So this is just an example of some of the things they did. They put markers on runners' bodies to see how their feet and ankles were moving, as well as their knees and hips, because we know that what happens at the foot goes all the way up the rest of our bodies. And they also put pressure sensors under the foot so that they could see what the pressures look like, how forces were being distributed under our feet. And the data we got back looked something like this, and this, again, this is state-of-the-art for late 90s. Stuff has gotten a little more advanced since then, but it gives you a sense for what we were looking for. So again, joint position as you're moving through foot strike, and what the loading looked like underfoot as you're moving through foot strike in a natural state. And then our researchers looked at the same runners in shoes on hard ground across both male and female runners. And after analyzing all the data, they uncovered a few key differences between those conditions. So when you're running in a natural state versus in shoes, there are 4 key ways that we're different in terms of the way we move, and 1 key way that we're different in terms of the way we exert force underfoot. And those parameters became the guardrails for what came next in Free. This is a sketch made by Eric Ibar, the guy who designed the original Free 5.0, along with a lot of the most legendary sneakers in our history. And those guardrails eventually led to this product, the original Nike Free 5.0 that we introduced in 2004. This is a view of the bottom, and I think a lot of you will be familiar with this probably by now. And it's almost gotten to the point that we're so familiar with it that we've forgotten how revolutionary it was, because back when Free was launched, everybody was making motion control shoes, trying to force the foot to move in a specific way. So Free was just a revolution because it was the exact opposite, just like Varman. Allow the body to do what it wants to do, allow us to run the way we're designed to run. So as big of an impact as it had, we didn't rest on our laurels. So that's the version we introduced in 2004. We updated it in 2007, then again in 2010, and than in 2012. And if you look at the way we progressed over time, basically what we did was increase the number of grooves, or sipes we call them, underfoot. You can almost think of that as being the standard definition version that we launched with, and then progressively over the years we got to a high definition version. So more grooves was great because it allowed us to deliver a midsole that was more flexible and would move naturally for an even wider range of runners. So, we were pretty happy about that. But as the team was wrapping up this project in 2012, they asked themselves, okay, what's next? Should we just keep on the same path? Because we could. We had some prototypes where we just went even higher resolution. So is that the approach that we should take? And instead of just going down that road, they decided to take a step back and actually get back to the basics again of the way the body works and the way the foot works. And we really started with the foot strike. Now, if you think about it, if you were to ask your average person, how does the foot work when it hits the ground when you're running? I think a lot of people would probably think of something like this. You land at the heel, then you get into mid-stance and toe off, and the force is just kind of moving straight through the bottom of the foot. But if you observe runners, more complicated than that, because for every person there's a different way of running. Just in this video, we're seeing 3 different types of running. Essentially, forefoot striking, midfoot striking, heel striking. So this first runner, she's a forefoot striker. She's landing on the ball of her foot. The second guy, he's a heel striker. And then this third runner is a midfoot striker. She's landing mostly flat on her foot. The key thing to emphasize is that none of these foot strikes is the right foot strike. They're just right for each of those individual runners. But you can see, even with the naked eye, that there's big differences here. Now, we took this a step further. We used something called force plate analysis, where we could see how the forces were loading on the foot and how they were moving under the foot as you were running, to take a deeper look at this. And we found that when you're a heel striker, instead of the force just moving straight under your foot, it's actually really dynamic. Almost all of us, we land on the outer side, the lateral side of our heel, and then the force moves immediately as we start to pronate, and it's just constantly shifting from side to side until we eventually toe off. So there's a few moments when the force is moving linearly, but for most of the time it's just really dynamic, constantly shifting from side to side. For a midfoot striker, it's amplified. So you're landing in a flatter position, but then your heel does touch down, and that's when this force is actually moving backward for a brief period of time before you go to toe off. And again, you see this great dynamism in the way the force is moving underfoot. And then finally, you have a forefoot striker, typical forefoot striker, landing much more at the ball of the foot. But again, when the heel drops, the force is actually moving backward before you toe off. So when we overlaid at the time, state-of-the-art free siping pattern on these different ways of moving, and the way the force is moving on the foot, it became clear to us that this geometry wasn't going to be the ideal way to move forward. Because if you've got force moving linearly on the foot, and in many cases moving diagonally on the foot, and then in some cases even moving in the opposite direction, we just asked, is a square really the best geometry to unlock all of those planes of motion? And it was clear to us that it isn't. And actually, the answer was staring us right in the face, because it's a hexagon. That's the shape that was going to allow us to unlock motion in all of these paths, in all of these planes. And so that's what led to the introduction of this hex geometry in the free updates that we introduced last year. This is that geometry brought to life on the new Nike Free 3.0 Flyknit that we're introducing here today. A really beautiful update, I think. But you might notice that the midsole is the same midsole that we introduced last year. So that's the case across all 3 of the free updates for Summer 15. We're on what we call carryover midsole. But the great thing is that that's given our teams the opportunity to really obsess on the fit and feel of the uppers. And so I'll just quickly take you through some of those updates for each of the models, starting with the 5.0. And for us, the 5.0 is an incredibly important model because for so many runners, it's the best starting point for a natural motion experience. If you've never run in a natural type shoe, for most people, this is probably going to be the best place to start because it's closest to a conventional shoe. Like I mentioned, the midsole is the same as the one we introduced last year. But the upper, the team did a few key things. Now, the first thing was, the mantra here was, let's get back to basics. The shoe, the 5.0 that's in the marketplace right now, it's a nice update, but we got a lot of feedback from runners that it was a little too stiff. in the midfoot here. There were too many layers that were restricting the movement of the foot. So the team just dissected every single component in the shoe, and if something wasn't absolutely essential to delivering on this natural running experience, they took it away. So they were able to eliminate one whole layer of material from this whole midfoot area across lateral and medial sides, and that just makes the upper so much more supple, and it just feels so much better on the foot. One other thing they did that seems like a small thing, but it turns out to be really important, is they completely changed the construction of the tongue. The tongue in the 5.0 that's in the market now is a single layer material. It's a lot like the tongues we use in our track and field products, really thin. And that's great for shorter runs, but the feedback we heard was when I was going for a longer run, I started to feel lace pressure, it started to feel uncomfortable. So we moved away from that single layer construction to a sandwich mesh construction, meaning that we have a layer of mesh and then a layer of foam and then another layer of mesh. So you create this sandwich with the mesh in the middle, and it creates a much more comfortable environment for your foot. I really encourage you after this presentation is over to come on up, and if there's paper in here, just take it out and just stick your hand inside and just feel how much more supple it is along the midfoot and also at the tongue. And I think once you feel that, you're just going to want to put it on because it just feels so nice. So some really key updates to the upper of the 5.0. One other really nice side benefit we've achieved is by taking away that excess material, the weight has been dropped quite a bit. I think you'll feel it in the hand. It's double-digit grams for both the men's and women's models in terms of the weight saving. So just lots of great updates all around for the new 5.0 for 715. But that's not the only shoe that's been updated. We also made some really nice updates to the 4.0. Again, all about obsessing fit and feel, because the midsole is the same as we introduced last year. And as you know, the 4.0 has been based on Flyknit, which is just an amazing technology. It enables us to do things we could never do before. And in the case of the Summer 15 4.0, we've really just focused on refining what we introduced last year. So one of the bits of feedback we received was that the forefoot of the 4.0 was a little too roomy. People were saying when they're on a run, sometimes they could feel their feet sliding side to side. So we didn't want to change the width, we didn't want to make the shoe narrow, but the team took some volume out of the upper, just around the ball of the foot, so the width stayed the same, but the volume decreased a little bit. So you still get that great comfort, but without the extra space, without the gaps that some people were telling us about. In the midfoot, we did the exact opposite, because the feedback we received there was, it's actually a little bit too tight for me, especially on the first couple of runs. So there, we again kept the width the same, but in this case, we increased the volume so that, from that very first try-on to the last kilometer of your run, it's going to feel fantastic around the foot. So forefoot and midfoot, some really nice tuning. Finally, for the heel, if you remember, if you look at my shoes, this is the four that's in the market right now. We have the seam on the lateral side as well as on the medial side. For the Summer 15 update, the team was able to completely eliminate the lateral seam. So you still have just the one seam on the medial side, but no seam on the lateral side. And that's great for a couple of reasons. One, seams are always a potential source of irritation because seams have to be joined with a stitch. And that stitching stands proud of the material and can sometimes rub against your foot. So by eliminating that seam and the stitching that goes with it, we're able to completely eliminate the potential for irritation there. One other benefit, though, is that because now this whole upper is one piece of material that's just closed here, we get much more consistent fit. Whereas in the past, this whole heel piece was a separate piece that was made at a separate time and then joined together with the rest of the upper. That could lead to some inconsistencies in fit. Now, because it's all one piece of material constructed at the same time, we get a much more consistent fit across the entire shoe. So from the forefoot to the midfoot to the heel, some really nice updates to the 4.0. And then finally, last but certainly not least, is the 3.0. Again, we are on a carrier midsole, so the same midsole that went just last year. I don't know if anybody's ever talked about this as well. One of the cool features about this shoe is that the siping along the sidewall of the midsole is actually done with lasers. And it's just a cool process. It's just, we don't do that very often. It's just nice to highlight it. But again, here it was all about obsessing the fit and feel of the upper. And the one bit of feedback we heard about the 3.0 is that I love that it feels like a sock on my foot, but it's a little too tight. There's a little bit too much compression. especially if I've been wearing it for a little while, or if I'm in a long run, I just start to feel like it's pressing against my foot. So the team focused on engineering the yarns in our Flyknit upper so that it would still feel like a sock on your foot, still kind of melt away as you're running, but without anywhere near as much compression. And one of the easy ways to tell the difference is that, you know, the 3.0 that's in the market now, when you see it on the shelf, you'll often see the toe kind of curled up because there's just so much compression in the upper here. But, you know, as you can see here, you're not getting any of that because we've relaxed all of that excessive elasticity. And that's the case over the entirety of the shoe, so it's just going to feel much more comfortable. And you can see it, if you see some people wearing it around, it looks completely different on your foot, much more relaxed. And then one other nice feature that was introduced was this notch to the ankle collar. And that's nice for a couple of reasons. First, it makes it easier to put the shoe on. It gives you this kind of release so that you can put the shoe on and take it off more easily. But also, it relieves the compression around the ankle that a lot of runners told us about. If you're a knitting geek, this is also just like the coolest thing to be able to make this layered construction without two separate pieces of material. So it's just something cool to geek out on as well. But overall, just some great updates that make this feel like a totally different shoe, even though it's on the same midsole platform. So some great updates to the 3.0 as well for 715. And before wrapping up, I just wanted to talk about one shoe. I'm not sure if everybody here is going to be taking through this Nike Free TR Flyknit session tomorrow, but I wanted to touch on it because I think it's a great example of the fact that for Nike, Natural Motion is much more than just a shoe or even a collection of shoes. It's an ethos, it's a philosophy that's informing everything we do across categories. So in this case, the Free TR5 Flyknit is a women's training shoe made specifically for the needs of female athletes. But you're going to see our Natural Motion principles applied towards apparel and equipment as well. So it's a really big idea that is spreading to more and more of our products because we recognize that our innate potential is really something incredible, and so we want to allow all of us, each of us, to tap into it. So just wanted to highlight that. And then last thing I wanted to mention is everything we do at Nike is really focused on serving the needs of athletes. You know, hopefully you saw that in what Bill Barman did for his athletes, and hopefully you've seen how we've really, all the updates we've made to these free shoes for 715 have been driven by feedback we received from athletes. So I just wanted to emphasize that, I guess, before going, that you guys, your feedback, the things you do, that's what inspires us and helps us make better products. That's what gets us up in the morning and excited to go to work. So it's just a huge part of what we do, and we really appreciate all the feedback that we receive. It's what enables us to do what we do. So those are the updates to our Natural Motion lineup for 715, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Heather.